r/AskReddit. Hey Reddit, when did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? I was learning violin when I was about 10 from an instructor at my local music shop. I got the weirdest feeling from him, even though he didn't do anything out of the ordinary. I wanted to vomit every time I looked at him, especially his hands. After 4 lessons I told my parents that I had a terrible feeling about him and I never wanted to go back. Luckily, they listened and didn't make me ever go to him again. A few years later he was arrested for molesting multiple of his students. I have no idea how I knew something was off. He never did or said anything, but I just felt it. I woke up from a deep sleep at like 2 AM during a winter storm. Something wasn't right. I immediately went looking for my senior dog and couldn't find her anywhere in the house. My roommates had a tendency to let her out for a walk and forget about her. Closing the door, I ran to the front of the house and found her laying on the welcome mat. She was hardly breathing and covered in snow. She had been outside alone for at the very least 5 hours. I moved out shortly after. Last year, December 1st, I had slept for almost a week trying to fight what I thought was the flu. Woke up and that exact gut feeling kept on telling me something's not right with me. Called the parents to tell them and then cabbed myself to the emergency room. Took blood, the whole 9 yards. Was there for 8 hours. Discharged and sent home. Called the next morning asking me to come back because they found something in my blood. Bacteremia and endocarditis. I was put on penicillin immediately for 2 months. More tests, more things wrong. Went for a specialized test on December 21st. Woke up to them telling me I need surgery as soon as possible. They are trying to find a surgical team. Earliest is the 24th. I go in, and while they are operating I have an ascending aortic aneurysm, and it caused an aortic dissection. They are able to fix it. I've got a synthetic valve in there now. Here's the kicker. I work in a restaurant kitchen, just before the start of the holiday season. Normally most cooks would tough it out and just work. Most think, it happens and it'll get better soon. Just keep going. There was just something about the way I was feeling this time that made me go to the hospital. I'm told that if I had done that, I more than likely would have died before my birthday and they would have found out about the aneurysm during the autopsy. That still sends fucking chills down my spine. My best friend works as an emergency room nurse at the same hospital that I was operated on, and she was freaking out internally, but kept it together on the outside for me. She explained just how serious this all was after I was in recovery. I've promised to tell her whenever I get that same feeling again. TL, Dr. Gut told me to go to the hospital. If I hadn't I would have been dead 3 weeks later. Cheers. I was walking out of a grocery store when I saw this kid about to cross the road. Something came over me and I yanked him back onto the sidewalk. Not even a second later a truck came flying past. He was probably around 7 or 8ish. When I was in college, I lived in a sketchy part of Chicago, Humboldt Park/Logan Square before gentrification. I liked to take late night strolls, even when I was living in that neighborhood as a 20-year-old woman. Yeah, I know. Pretty dumb of me. One night, I was feeling stressed out, so I embarked on one of my late night strolls. I was walking along a somewhat busy road. Cars were zooming past me. Pretty normal. I wasn't paying much attention because I was too wrapped up in whatever was stressing me out that night. Suddenly, a chill shot up my spine. Hypervigilance washed over me, and I became more alert than I had ever been. Something was wrong. Someone was watching me. I quickly spotted a car. It was driving in the opposite direction, a little slower than usual. It was too dark for me to see anyone inside the car, and the car was pretty unassuming. But I still knew something was off. They were watching me. I just knew. The car drove past me and then made a U-turn. Now it was right behind me, creeping along the curb. Luckily, there was a Walgreens a few blocks ahead. I started walking faster, and the car eventually sped past me and disappeared into a corner. I somehow knew I wasn't safe yet, so I still sprinted to Walgreens. I told the security guard what happened, and we both went outside. The car was parked up the street, about 50 to 100 feet away. The security guard was a big guy who looked intimidating. He marched toward the car, and the car immediately backed up, made a U-turn, and then booked it out of there. The security guard called the cops, and they drove me home. I never took a late night stroll again. My gut made me more alert, but it was really the security guard who saved my life. I'm positive that, if he wasn't there that night, something bad would have happened to me. I wish I could find that security guard to thank him. Not me, but my science teacher. When she was a teenager, she was standing near some lights at a pedestrian crossing with her and her friend. Very chill, but out of nowhere she had this gut feeling that both of them had to move. They moved just a couple meters away, and the next moment a car had hit another car, and had hit one of the street electricity utility poles, and it had fell and exploded. Minor explosion enough distance away that it didn't hurt the girls exactly where they were. One of the wires had also snapped and hit it exactly where they were standing as well. They basically were in a scene of car wreckage, and snapped wires and electricity explosions and the pole collapse. Just real insane. If the pole had missed them, the wire would have hit them, and if not, then most likely the cars. That gut feeling of moving away saved both of them. I remember this story so clearly from high school science class, because it was such a WTF. Pity I only paid attention to these things, and not actually science. I went out with my best friend on New Year's last year, and were having drinks with her friends, when I realized I was out of cigarettes. I left for a few minutes to walk over and grab a pack, and ended up talking to a homeless guy for a while, and when I went over to the entrance of the bar, she was outside, and said something mean to me for no reason and walked off. I was confused, so I decided it would be good if I took a walk to let her cool off and then figure out what she was upset about. I was going to walk down the street for a bit, but something told me to turn left, walking behind the bar and then turning to the side of the bar when I see a girl laying down on the sidewalk and people walking by her. As I'm walking over to help, I realize it's my friend and she's not very conscious. She was probably drugged while I was getting smokes, and who knows what would have happened if I hadn't decided to go that way. Scares the shit out of me. I was with a coworker. He had lied to me about going to a family party of his. But when I showed up, it was just him and we went to a bar. I rolled my eyes and just thought I could clench my teeth through it. He knew the owner of the bar and got me alcoholic drinks. I was only 20. I started pouring out the drinks when the dude was shooting pool because I didn't want to be tipsy/drunk while dealing with him. That decision honestly saved me. I told him I wanted to go home, but he talked me into taking him home first. So I followed the directions he gave me, and I pulled into a hookah bar parking lot instead. He started getting really aggressive and trying to kiss me. I kept pushing him off. I was still trying to be polite, but firm, and telling him to stop. That's when I noticed the group of guys around my car, talking to my coworker in my car in another language. He then opened my car door, got out, and proceeded to grab me by the hair to try to pull me out of my car. The other guys gathering around. I had the mind to lock my door when I noticed the other guys. I also had put my car in reverse. So when he grabbed my hair, I let off the brake and my car started rolling back. So he let go of me. It was terrifying. I told our boss the next day, and he quit when our boss asked him about it. Edit. I even drove away with my passenger door wide open. I didn't stop to close it until I was several miles away, and even then I was super paranoid. It didn't save me, but I saved someone else. When I was 6, my brother, 8 at the time, and I would go to my grandma's house while our mom worked late some nights anyway. One day I was just randomly thinking about fire alarms. I don't know what caused me to think about it, but after I started I couldn't stop. I have ads and this super focus thing, so whenever I'm thinking about something as simple as fire, Alarms, it consumes my mind. I asked my grandma, and she said she hadn't tested hers in a while. Just 4 kicks she did, and sure enough the batteries were dead. She replaced the batteries and made sure they worked. The very next morning her house caught on fire while she was asleep. If she didn't hear the fire alarms, she would have been trapped in her room on the 2nd story without a phone or any way to contact help. She most likely would die. Always make sure fire detector/alarms work in my house now. Not me, but my mother saved my grandfather's life when he had a stroke in his chair in their living room. We had all started to walk around the development when my mother, after about 50 to 75 meters from the house, said, "I'm going to go back and check on dad." I went with her, and I nearly witnessed my grandfather die. He was on the chair, conscious, but unable to move or talk, just looking at my mother with bulging eyes. She called 911 once, then twice when she felt that they were running late. Ambulance came, got him on the stretcher, but it was too wide to fit out the door. We ended up tearing the door frame off to get him out. Because he was conscious, he actually remembers the ride to the hospital. He told us later that he heard the driver or someone say, "There is not a chance that this guy lives." That was when I was around 5 to 6 years old. He is still alive to this day, more than a decade later. At my mother's funeral, part of his speech was about how, without my mother's actions, he would not have been able to spend time with her during her final years of life. And for that, he is eternally grateful. Forgot one. About 10 years ago, working security at a site about 50 miles from home, got off shift at midnight and didn't bother to change out of uniform because I was only going to stop for gas. 2 stations in the town I was working in were open after midnight, but it slipped my mind as I drove past the first one. Pulled into the other, same brand, same gas price, same sort of dump entirely, and just didn't like something about it. Nobody else around, Buddy Clark, that I could see, but I decided to go back to the other one. Topped off and headed back out of town. I get close to that station again. 3 city cop cars, 2 deputies and a state trooper are outside blocking the road with guns drawn. Turns out a city cop walked in on a robbery. Dude put a bullet in his vest, and the store owner knocked the robber out cold with a bat before the cop could recover enough to get his gun out. That would have been me, in a uniform with a nice shiny badge, but no body armor. Wow, you made it to the end. Thank you for watching, mate. Smash that like button, and subscribe for more daily content.